Hi, this is Tom Kane, the voice of Jedi Master Yoda. And this is Inside the Force. Listen, you will. Foreseen it I have, yes.
It is a period of Star Wars mania, as new movies, comic books, novels, and TV shows populate the system. Fueled by their love and passion for the galaxy far, far away, two exceptional geeks tap into hundreds of holocrons in order to bring you the knowledge and insight of all things Star Wars. Come and join them as they go inside the Force.
Welcome, everybody. David Cottingham here for Inside the Force, bringing you a special edition episode. We're going to bring on a guest here on Inside the Force that is well-versed in the Star Wars universe. So glad to have him on. If you don't know who he is, he's been the voice of so many characters on the online video games from LucasArts, as well as a staple host at Celebrations. And we always talk about you got to get the Star Wars Celebration if you haven't gone already. But you'll see him there. Met him a couple times. We just kind of briefed it over a little bit to refresh his memory a little bit. But I'm hoping to see him next time we get Celebration in the States here, because I'm probably not going to be going to Europe. But love connecting with him on this finally. We've been talking before even Celebration Anaheim to get him on the show. So I'm glad he's finally made the time, and happy to finally connect and get him on here, because I think he's a big face of Star Wars right now, and I'm a huge fan of his. So let's bring him on. David W. Collins, how are you, sir?
Hey, David, how are you?
I'm very good, very good. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, and thank you for jogging my clearly going memory in my old age. I don't know what that's all about, but no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, it's great to be on here and always chatting about Star Wars. It's pretty much my favorite thing to do. So yeah, I'm all yours. And I
failed to mention. Apology. I failed to mention your newest endeavor. I guess is the YouTube channel, the Comlink.
Right, which is funny because we started this YouTube channel. Actually, it was on Kevin Smith's channel,
right?
With one of his producers and camera guys, J.C. Reifenberg. It's actually really J.C.'s show, and I just am in front of the camera. Mm-hmm. I mean, he really is the brainchild of the whole thing, and just an incredibly talented, creative guy. And we both just love Star Wars. We met doing Kyle Newman's documentary Return of the Jedi,
yes,
which was something that came out in 2013. And he's like, hey, do you ever do freelance stuff? So I started mixing Jay and Silent Bob comic, like live concert footage for him.
Oh, I see.
And then after a while, we started talking about doing documentaries, and then the Comlink started. We did, I would say, probably 2 seasons worth of the Comlink. And it's different than a podcast. I mean, you need like 2 camera operators, and you need a video editor, and video content is just, as you know, as a guy that produces a podcast, and I do a podcast as well, and
mm-hmm.
It's one thing to coordinate a time and get in front of a microphone. It's a whole other thing to get people to fight through traffic and have a guest like
yes.
Vanessa Marshall on or something like that. So we're talking about starting it up again here on the ramp up to The Force Awakens. But the Comlink was also something that came out at a time when there was this real lull, right? After
mm-hmm.
Celebration Europe in August of 2013, it was like, well, let's do something, because, we're a year away from Rebels.
Right.
I remember thinking. And we actually finally started the Comlink around the same time that Rebels was debuting.
Mm-hmm.
And, this was all before we even had our first Force Awakens trailer. So it was a great time to start that show. We're going to come back and just do it more in a live format. But yeah, thanks for mentioning that. We're going to be coming back in the next week or two, actually.
Well, yeah, because I really enjoy watching it, obviously, because you get, obviously a lot of the people that are involved in these shows and these movies and stuff like that. So it's really, to me, the only place you can really go besides StarWars.com and to get a different take on and a different interview setting for these characters or these actors that play these characters and stuff like that. So there was nothing else around that, like you said, that was like that besides podcasts. To get this information.
Well, and especially to do it's funny because we were always told the general wisdom was, you really should try and keep it to like 3 minutes.
Right.
And we never could. I mean, we would, our show would end up being 10, 12 minutes long with a little news recap and all that. And then we said, this is stupid. This is such a good interview. Why don't we just release the whole thing in an extended edition?
Correct, yeah.
And the extended editions were what the hardcore Star Wars fans like us wanted to see anyway.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So, and then when we'd put an interview up and we didn't put the extended interview up right away, we would get all of these messages. Where's the extended interview? So we actually took that as a really good sign of, when it comes to Star Wars, you don't have to make it like a 3-minute web junk thing. You can actually just do what you want to do and not worry about it. But we were really aggressive about it. We were wondering if there were going to be sponsors that were interested in all that.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally now we've kind of just reassessed and we're thinking, well, let's do it another way that's a little bit more casual. And so that's kind of what we're going to do now. We also had to move a couple of times. We started in one space. We actually started, with a set in my wife's work on a weekend. We shot like 5 episodes that way.
Oh, wow.
Then we moved into a studio with James Arnold Taylor. And then now that, his space has moved, and so we've moved. And so there's all kinds of behind the scenes whatever. But yeah, I'm glad people watched it. It was and continues to be really fun. And we all became really good friends because of it too.
Mm-hmm.
JC's a good friend of mine now, and we're working on other projects together. So, but anyway,
great. Well, I want to lead up to that in a sense because I'm always intrigued by not only obviously Star Wars fandom and the people that we talk to and their Star Wars fandom, but I want people to know kind of your background as well. So let's kind of rewind it back, get your memory going again, and talk about a little bit where you're from, where you grew up. I think you grew up in Washington. Is that correct?
No, actually, I grew up in Northern California.
Oh, okay.
Ironic. I was 45 minutes from Skywalker Ranch and had no idea.
Wow.
As a kid, I grew up in this little town called Vacaville, California, which is Spanish for cowtown. Little town. In fact, I remember the little movie theater showing, the re-release of Star Wars because I was too young to remember the actual Star Wars coming out. The re-release of Empire, and then I remember seeing Return of the Jedi at this little theater as a kid. In the little Main Street. In the small little downtown at the time. I mean, it's grown since then, but in the early 80s, it was definitely really small. And the line for Return of the Jedi blew my little mind because it was so long. I've told this story before. Stop me if you've heard it, but the theater was on a city block, little small town Main Street city block, and the line went out the door and around the block and all the way around the building and circled back again, so that the end of the line was actually getting kind of confused with the front of the line. The block. Yeah. The block was too small to hold the line for the movie. Thus, the phrase "blockbuster" has a literal meaning in my mind because of Return of the Jedi. When I think of blockbuster, I think, well, what other movie ever did that to my small town growing up? No other movie ever did that, but Return of the Jedi. And that's why I just kind of always grew up thinking, well, Star Wars is like the most amazing thing out there.
Yeah.
Everything else is just kind of trying to be Star Wars. How did he do that? And that curiosity of how he did that just is something that I lived with for a long time. And I grew up just like any other kid. I played soccer and baseball and sports. And at one point, I was given the ultimatum of, you got to do something. If you're not going to be playing sports this year, you got to do Cub Scouts or you got to do play an instrument or something. My dad had a trumpet from his days in the Army. So I started playing trumpet when I was 10 or 11, ended up getting braces and discovering, rock and roll. So I started playing the drums. Anyway, we got really involved in music, got involved in theater. I wasn't as good as my older brother at sports, who he was really good and very passionate about it. Excuse me. I'm just getting over a cold for all of you listening. Apologize. But, so that the sports thing kind of became my older brother's real area of expertise, and I just kind of started drifting more into music and into theater. I ended up traveling all over the place in a youth theater organization. I had family in Washington State, so I spent a few years up there going to college, studying music at Whitworth University, and then moved to Boston to go to Berklee College of Music. I mean, it really kind of took over my life, the theater and music thing, And but I was really interested in film, and specifically interested in Star Wars. I remember being in college, when the Truce of Bakura by Kathy Tyers came out, and the Courtship of Princess Leia, and the Kevin Anderson Jedi Academy trilogy, and the Carillion trilogy, which was so boring in my opinion. What is it? Assault at Salonia and Showdown at Centerpoint, all those Han Solo Carillion trilogy novels.
Yep.
I read all those. I remember reading the Canterbury Tales for a literature class, and reading Tales from Jabba's Palace at the same time, and being like, "This is brilliant,"
Yeah.
And so like and then I remember Rebel Assault came out on PC, X-Wing came out on PC, TIE Fighter, Dark Forces. All of these video games started coming out on PC when I was in college. And so, and the Power of the Force action figures came out in 95 as well. So all of these things started coming out again, and it slowly started taking over my life again, especially after Jurassic Park, when George Lucas said, now I think I can start writing another Star Wars movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it just like, that kid in me just kind of awakened all over again. Meanwhile, I was taking, music theory, and I was doing plays, and then I moved to Boston and started studying recording technology, and started, and the internet was really starting to, come of age, and I had found Lucasfilm's website and had become obsessed with Skywalker sound, and eventually got an internship at Skywalker, probably a month, a little less than a month after The Phantom Menace opened in the U.S. And started working on the scoring stage there as an intern, and my jaw just dropped. My first week was my first day was setting up for a 120-piece orchestra for Disney's Inspector Gadget score, and that blew my mind. I'm like, 2 days. I set up for a recording session in an hour. Like, get it done, fast. And here we were setting up for 2 solid days, in order for the orchestra to come in and have everything go smoothly. And then from there, just working on albums and scores and things like that at Skywalker Ranch for the summer, and then kind of went part-time all through 99, 2000. Eventually got a job as a sound assistant at LucasArts in 2000, and just started working on Star Wars video games like crazy. And I had known all of their back catalog. I mean, I just played so much of it. And, Skywalker was very, and still is, it's an incredibly professional place. People are there. They're very passionate about audio. People would not necessarily talk about being a Star Wars fan, because you didn't want people to think that you were going to be like a freak about it, and, they couldn't trust you or something. And you weren't always working on Star Wars at Skywalker. You would, right. I remember doing a class, like a piano record, and a string quartet, Kronos Quartet for Requiem for a Dream, and very, very different. But suddenly you're at LucasArts, and then if you're not working on an adventure game, you're working on Star Wars. And suddenly the fact that I knew that TIE and TIE Fighter stood for Twin Ion Engine was an asset. That was a very different. It was a very different thing. Coming from Skywalker, suddenly if I knew more about Star Wars than anyone in my department, I became the go-to guy to be like, so what blaster should I use for this ship? I'm like, well, it kind of looks like an N1 Starfighter, so use this one. But if you want an alternate, use this one, because and I just started really geeking out. All the episode 1 material had come from the ranch, and I was writing, library descriptions for it, so that, all sound designers would just have it at their fingertips. And this blaster was used for blah, 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 oh, okay. And then you pop it in, So a lot of just very assistant level work. Worked on a lot of, Star Wars Starfighter, Jedi Starfighter, Obi-Wan, Galaxies, Bounty Hunter, even some of the old Lucas Learning titles before that went away, like Star Wars Math, and stuff like that. Just a lot of those early titles. I'd say my first really big one was Republic Commando, where I suddenly became the audio lead. I mean, games were moving so fast, and they were exploding, and the money was exploding, but the level of complication was too. So Republic Commando, the Lego Star Wars stuff, Battlefront 2, the Force Unleashed 2, Lego Star Wars, Lego Indiana Jones. All the Clone Wars games. I mean, and then there were other non-Star Wars games too, like Thrillville and Monkey Island and all those. I mean, I really loved working on all that stuff, and I I was definitely guilty of eating, sleeping, and breathing LucasArts for about a decade. I mean, I just was obsessed.
Well, is it typical that I guess engineers like yourself that get into the voice art part of it?
Oh, right. That's a great story. That's a great question, actually, too. No, it's not typical. It happens.
Yeah.
There were definitely talented people out there, but my theater background, it's a great lesson in who you are eventually comes out of you no matter what,
Right.
Because sometimes I felt like I was this kind of dramatic storyteller passion that was in disguise as a sound editor. I felt like that a lot. And I still feel like that sometimes because I enjoy sound editing, but it was something that was a part of what I liked about the whole picture, the whole hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
I think composers really tap into this too. When you're writing music, you're really thinking about story beats and journey and things like that. So what started out was we were working on this game called Galactic Battlegrounds. And we were working on Obi-Wan too. And before they would go and spend the money on voice actors, they would write a script and they used to do what they call scratch dialogue. And so they'd bring people in to record it from all over the studio. Well, so, an email went out. Hey, if you're available, come by the studio. And I just wrote back this assistant, sure, I'd love to. And I get behind the booth and they give me a stormtrooper to do. And I do it. And I'm like screaming and all this kind of stuff. Then they give me some droids. Then they give me Lando Calrissian. I do a terrible Lando. But at the time it was like, hey, why not? So they were like, wow, this guy actually understands how to read a script. Wow, this is great. And then they kept calling me and calling me and calling me and calling me. Eventually, one of the producers on Jedi Starfighter heard me do, I think he heard me do a Nemoidian. I think he heard me do Newt Gunray, which I ended up doing for real later on. And I was doing it for Jedi Starfighter. I was doing something like this,
Yeah.
And he's like, that's really good. And he goes, hey, my wife's an agent. If you ever have any material that you'd like to send, let me know. And then a little later on, for Knights of the Old Republic, the first one, for the PC version, they added Trandoshans and a couple of other alien characters that weren't in the Xbox version. And so they said, hey, can you take a shot at this? And I did. And it was very very guttural and weird. But the fact that I could actually read an alien script, I think was really the thing that sold it, And so the voice director at the time was like, I don't have anybody that can do this. They did this thing called Taft-Hartley, and they Taft-Hartley me into the union. So then suddenly I became union eligible. And then I put together a demo, and then I got an agent over 10 years ago. And then it just kind of slowly kept happening. The proxy thing was much different because that was a named character. They were going to go after a named actor. And I don't think they knew what they wanted. And my friendship with Sam really tied into that, and being at the table read and being part of that story group too. I think I just kind of knew what I thought proxy should be.
Yeah.
And a lot of people on the team agreed. I don't know if Hayden Blackman, the director, was quite ready for that, in terms of, I think he still was trying to figure out what it was, and he wanted to make sure that his game had the best, and he's absolutely right. To want to do that, but it just really worked. And so even though I was reading proxy in the game for months, it wasn't official probably until about 6 months after I'd been reading it.
Wow.
You know what? We're actually going to keep using it, because there was this idea of like, well, is this temp or is this the real thing? And so that's kind of how that happened. But yeah, it's not typical, but it does happen. I have a couple of other colleagues that have kind of made the jump from game developer into voice actor. Mm-hmm. And they're very, very good. I think that there's kind of a natural element that people share. Even Tom Kane, Tom Kane's story is great because, and he's never told me this story personally, but Dara O'Farrell, my old boss, who ended up getting me in the union, told me this story about him. So Tom, if it's not true, I apologize. But he was in advertising and he was reading his own copy all of the time, and he was really good, and he got an agent, and then eventually his agent was like, hey, are you going to do this or not? Because, you got to make a decision. You got to jump because the demand's getting really high, and eventually went full-time voiceover. And that was really inspiring to me because I was like, well, how did he do that?
Yeah.
I'm still not full-time. I'm almost full-time, but I do other stuff as well. But anyway, trip down memory lane.
No, that is fantastic. That's exactly. You pretty much answered everything I want to know about your background, except I am curious. I like to always ask, growing up, because you're in the field you are, who were some of your heroes, the people that you looked up to?
Oh, boy. Some of my heroes. You mean in sound, in music?
No, I mean anything.
Acting,
Because for example, for me, I'm in the podcasting world and I'm in the production world. We do a lot of. I run a production company here in Lexington, Kentucky, and we shoot a bunch of stuff and films and all this stuff. But growing up, my hero was Michael Jordan. I was a huge basketball nut.
right.
I loved Michael Jordan. I thought that inspired me because I knew I could never be an NBA basketball player. But what it did inspire me was I went to college for marketing because what he did for marketing for basketball for Nike was like my dream job at the time. I wanted to go to. I actually had an internship lined up in Beaverton or Beavertown, Oregon.
Right.
But I actually ended up turning it down because I got an internship at UK here, University of Kentucky here, doing production. So I changed my mind pretty much right at the last second there. But anyway, obviously then some of my people that obviously. God, if I can, George Lucas is obviously one of my heroes.
Right.
But I'm just always curious about, who people, because a lot of paths are chosen based on their heroes. And I didn't know who you had.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the boring, obvious answer would be, for me, I guess, not surprising to anyone, would be George Lucas, Ben Burtt, right. John Williams. Gary Rydstrom was a hero of mine, especially when I learned more and more about him and his work in sound, Jurassic Park, Saving Private Ryan, The Terminator, all that kind of stuff. Randy Tom, a lot of these sound designers. But that was really later on. As a kid, a lot of it was Star Wars. I was a huge Star Wars fan. A huge Star Wars fan. I guess if I had some heroes... this has nothing to do with Star Wars, and this is going to seem just really random and out of left field. But one of the things I rarely talk about with people on podcasts is this undying love that I have for this relatively obscure rock band that I ended up kind of just latching onto quite a bit when I was a teenager because I saw them in a little club, and I've just been following ever since. And that's this band from Houston, Texas called King's X that I just loved because it was like a mix between the Beatles and Metallica and Sly and the Family Stone. And it was a power trio, kind of like Rush was a power trio.
Yeah.
And they had these huge like 3-part harmonies, but they had this really soulful kind of Motown lead vocal, but like 8-string bass and drums and amazing sounding guitar tone and like... I was really into music, and this was a band that never really took off. And for some reason, I ended up really kind of loving that about them because they never decided to do what was cool and what was in and what was hip. They just kind of listened to themselves.
Right.
And I feel like George Lucas just listened to himself too, but especially during the prequel era,
Yeah.
And I think I just like anyone that just kind of follows their own gut and just does what they think is true to themselves because they end up making something just totally unique and not so cookie cutter, and just because you are in a certain job doesn't mean that you have other skills that might not shine through and complement that job. Like being a sound editor that loves story and has some acting and music chops actually could make you a better sound editor in certain ways.
Absolutely.
I mean, and I love that kind of idea of letting who you really are shine through no matter what you're doing because it'll be a really great test to see if you're in the right place for yourself, but B also you can surprise yourself and those around you in anything that you do if you're true to who you are. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but
no, that is awesome. That's exactly what I'm talking about because I think it's not it is obviously this is a Star Wars talking podcast, but it's good to hear the other things that inspire people and the other things that get get people motivated. And I'm with you on that. Sports was my motivation in the beginning, even though I was a huge Star Wars fan growing up as well. But you have different paths you go down. And now I wanted to ask you this because as a childhood, because I'm like the only one out of everybody I know around here that grew up with Star Wars. I actually never had the Star Wars toys.
Oh, you didn't? No.
I didn't. And the reason why, it was weird because as a kid, to me, Star Wars was just so much bigger than the toys I was playing with, like G.I. Joes and Transformers and stuff like that. I don't know, I just felt like I didn't want to ruin it. I didn't want to buy it and get it out, and then like me and a bunch of guys just tear it apart. And I had so much more respect for the toys. Did you have a lot of the toys growing up?
I had not as many as my friends. I remember I had a friend named Brian Solak that had a ton. I had a friend named Adam that had a ton. I had a modest collection. Mm-hmm. I remember, my mom painting the bottom of their feet red with, nail polish, so we always knew which ones were mine. But the thing is that every mom thought of that, and so eventually every mom was like painting the bottom of their, and I was like,
right.
And I was like, no, Mom, that's Brian's because it's painted red. She's like, I did that. I'm like, no, you didn't. Like it still was totally confusing, which was great for stormtroopers, because you'd have multiple stormtroopers, so you could have your little, garrison. But it was bad for like Luke and Leia and Vader and 3PO. But anyway, I did have some of the toys. I think maybe what you're kind of instinctively saying there is that Star Wars is a phenomenon that the toys kind of grew out of, whereas G.I. Joe and Transformers were all about the toys.
Right.
And, with the deregulation of media and television and things like that in the 80s, Sunbow was able to create these half-hour-long commercials with Hasbro for G.I. Joe and Transformers. That's what those TV shows were.
Exactly.
The toys were, and to be fair, look, I was a huge Transformers and G.I. Joe fan growing up, and I had a lot of those toys. I at one point turned my entire bedroom as a kid into like a G.I. Joe, an entire G.I. Joe play area. It was crazy. I had the headquarters,
Yes.
which my dad surprised me with one time, and I spent way too much of my allowance buying G.I. Joe stuff. But Star Wars, I was much earlier, and I had the toys, but it was very slow. I remember the first toy I ever got. I'm old enough to remember this. I was asking my mom for a Star Wars figure. I want a Star Wars figure. I want a Star Wars figure. And she said, okay. After, days of pleading about this, she's like, I'll bring one home today. So she comes home. She's like, I'm bringing you a Star Wars figure. And she brings me this Star Wars figure, and I look at it, and it's one of the original, Star Wars, not the, one of the original from 78. This is like probably 80, 81.
Yeah.
And I look at this, maybe it was a little earlier than that, but I look at this and I don't recognize who it is. And I was so bewildered by it. My mom brought me a Star Wars toy, but who is this? It was the Death Star droid.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I had this Death Star droid kind of on its own for a long time, trying to like figure out what this thing was.
Yeah.
And then finally when I saw it again, I'm like, there's my toy, walking down the hall. But wait, my toy is also in the Sandcrawler. Wait, I don't get it. Wait, how did it get from there to there? And I didn't understand how part of the Death Star droid could be in the Sandcrawler, but then also show up in the Death Star later. And,
yeah.
I had some of the toys, but the toys were just kind of an offshoot. And this was a really weird time. I remember somehow my friend PJ had a copy of Star Wars on VHS, and I don't know how he had it. But I would always want to go over to his house, and every time I went over, he's like, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to watch Star Wars. And he's like, again? I was like, yeah. How can you, when given the opportunity to watch, why would you not? So, like, it was really sad. They'd all go out and play, and I'd still be sitting in front of the TV watching Star Wars just glued. But you couldn't just, the point is you couldn't just watch it. You had to actually go to the theater or, VHS and home video, was still really new at the time.
Right.
And I don't even think we had a VCR until much later. That first one came out, the CBS home video came out in 81, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so it took which seemed like an eternity when you were a kid.
Absolutely.
So the toys were just a way to bring it home, whereas He-Man was already in the home.
That's right.
Masters of the Universe, G.I. Joe was already in the home. You had the toys, and then it was being pumped onto your TV set. That's the thing. When the Clone Wars started, I was like, I have Star Wars on my TV every week.
Yeah.
I can't believe how cool this is. Like, we never had this growing up. You didn't have Star Wars coming to your TV unless you caught it on Showtime or one of the premium cable channels.
Yeah.
And like third run. But yeah, it's just different. It's different now than it was.
Yeah, that's a good point. I might have to use that now as I explained it, because it was always kind of baffling to a lot of my friends. Like, how can you be so big a Star Wars fan and not have the toys? Because it's what's funny is that that's what I do now, right? I buy the toys now because I put them on my desk and my shelf at home and stuff like that. So, and I got daughters that I'm trying to get in. They're fighting me a little bit, but I got do you want Star Wars toys for Christmas? That's kind of what I'm trying.
But maybe not the same toys that we do.
Yeah,
I want the big old sideshow collectible, whatever. They probably like. I actually I posted something on my Twitter. Actually, my wife posted it. I have 6 nieces, and
wow.
and I was with 4 of them recently, and they took a picture of me reading them Star Wars a couple weeks ago, and they were totally into it. One of them was wearing a little Her Universe Princess Leia, and another one, they were arguing over who gets to be Princess Leia, but one of them just really wants to be Darth Vader all the time. Like, it's crazy, what resonates with different kids and boys and girls. But yeah, Star Wars is for everyone, man. I think.
Yeah, we just went to Disney last week. I was in Disney World.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we spent took my 5-year-old. I have a 5 and a 1-year-old daughter, and I took my 5 mainly for her to see Disney and all that stuff. And she's a big Rebels fan right now. She loves Sabine, she loves Hera, and loves Princess Leia. Obviously, she's a girl, so she loves the girls. But yeah, we're trying to get her to, we've got the Leia costume for Halloween kind of sitting in the closet waiting for her to say, I want to be Princess Leia. So,
cool.
But yeah, so it's a process. We're trying to get her, but like you said, like it's funny is a couple of weeks ago I had just happened to throw in episode 4 and just over the weekend just throw it in while we were kind of messing around the house just to play it, and you find her stopping and watching and just staring and watching, and you're hoping this is it. This is where she's gonna get caught, hooked. So I'm trying.
And she's 5. She's 5.
She's 5.
Yeah. I wonder when the right age would be.
Yeah,
because
I
when
think
they
it
actually
might be a
can sit
little
and watch,
later,
like 6 or 7.
6 or 7 is what I'm thinking. Yeah. So my 1-year-old, I might wait a few more years to get her. There'll be a whole library of Rebels stuff and more movies. By the time she's 6, 7. So I might have to wait a little bit for her.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the nice things about getting to do voiceover direction for so many years was getting to know some of these great actors, especially when we were doing Comic-Con. What am I talking about? Clone Wars. Starts with a C. It's the same.
With a C. Yeah. Right.
Comic Clones. Clone Wars. So we were doing the Clone Wars video games like Republic Heroes and Lightsaber Duels and like the online Sony MMO, Clone Wars MMO, which I don't even know if it's still around. But anyway, you'd get to know people like Tom and James Arnold Taylor and Dee Baker. And I remember one time Dee Baker was talking about this very issue where he had his girls were getting a little older, and he was just starting to show them Star Wars, and he was trying to figure out when it was okay to show them Revenge of the Sith, because it's really dark.
It is.
But they all wanted to know, and this was kind of, the prequels had only been out for a few years, and Revenge of the Sith had only been out for a few years, and do you start him with episode 4? Do you start him with episode 1? And then when do you really get to tell them about Darth Vader? Because it's tragic. And it's scary. It can be really scary. And watching the immolation scene at the end of Revenge of the Sith, there's a reason that movie's PG-13, and he was really struggling with it. I never got to follow up, though. I never got to ask him, like, hey, so did they eventually see it, and what did they think, and how old were they when they saw it? But I do remember him kind of chatting about that during the breaks, because he's a huge Star Wars fan as well.
Yes, huge. And Tom, we were briefly talking about this real quick before we started rolling, was first time I had met Tom, because we've had him on the show a couple times, but first time I met Tom was we were standing in line at Celebration. I think it was Celebration 5 when Jon Stewart was interviewing George Lucas on the stage.
That was 5. Was that 5?
I think that was 5.
That was 5.
Because 6,
You're right.
6 was when he just happened to show up at the.
Yeah,
I think you were hosting that panel at the time.
I was, and it was funny because I was like, am I supposed to stay on stage? Should I leave? And
Yes, because I was in there. I was the few that showed up for that.
That's
Clone Wars panel.
That's a whole other story. I'll tell that in a sec. But no,
okay.
we'll tell that after you're done with your Tom.
Yeah, so we were waiting. We knew we had to get in line the night before to get into the main event there. So we actually got in line. That was Saturday morning. We got in line Friday night about 11 o'clock outside the convention center in Orlando. And we were probably about 80 or 90 people deep. And it was me and 3 other guys. So we're out there just hanging out. We all had stuff to do. We all, thankfully it's the time and age where you have iPhones and stuff like that. You can watch movies and stuff while you're sitting out there. So we're sitting there watching, Star Wars stuff and talking to all these people. And all of a sudden, about 2 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden, a little crowd gets going and standing up, and we all stand up, and there's Tom and James Arnold Taylor and D. Bradley Baker just signing autographs, hanging out with people.
That's awesome.
Walking down the line, and and it's funny because we came over to them and we started talking, and we were huge fans of theirs. And obviously, we got James Arnold Taylor to call our buddy back home who couldn't make it, and left a message as Obi-Wan. Like, you should be, I can't do his voice, but you should be down here at Celebration.
You should be here at Star Wars Celebration. I can't do it either.
Yeah, that's a lot better than me. But it was so great to, and that's when actually I first interacted with Tom about, hey, can you get on the podcast? So I got his manager's information and whatnot. But anyway, I thought that was just a great gesture for these guys, because they said they were in the hotel room across the way and just looked out the window and saw all these fans. And just said, you know what, we got to go hang out with this guy. So,
oh man, that's so cool. That's so cool. That's what I love about Celebration, and it's really Celebration in particular, because no matter where you go, you're going to run into a Star Wars fan that knows what's up. It's different than other cons where there's so many different fan bases kind of working together. It's like Star Wars. The sense of community at Celebration is just so incredibly strong because everyone's tapped into and looking at the same things.
Right.
And that really is one of the things that makes it so kind of familial, and is that a word even? Family-like. Familial. But it feels like family because everyone just kind of and you get to know people over the course of years and several years. And I've been lucky.
What was your first celebration?
My first celebration was a little over 10 years ago. It was Celebration 3 in Indianapolis.
That was my first.
It was.
Yeah.
I was not a stage host at the time, although I was hosting a very small stage at the LucasArts booth. I was demoing Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, the video game. And about once every hour, we'd do a show. We had a little stage on the side of the booth, and we would do a little presentation of the opening level of Revenge of the Sith. And what was interesting about it is that we had actual film footage in the game. So the first time people were able to see R2, let's put it cards on the table. It's not a great game, right?
No.
No. and it was one of those things where, and that's, oh my God, the stories I could get into about video game movie tie-ins and the pressure to get out there. But, everyone knew that everyone was going to buy it because curiosity about the game was so strong. No one sets out to make a bad game. It's just that, the push to get there, it just didn't quite gel in a lot of different ways. There were some fun things about it, but there were some things about it that, needed some polish, but it had to come out before the movie did.
Right.
And I feel like the 2000s in general was just filled with video game movie tie-ins because once Spider-Man did it in 2001,
I think, yeah.
Once they did it with their Activision game and everybody bought it, everyone in the film business was like, whoa, what is this? How come I just made almost as much on a video game, if not more, than I did at the box office with this game tie-in? Right? So suddenly you had Enter the Matrix coming out with the Matrix sequels. You've got, Lucasfilm wanting in on that action too, right? You've got these people going, all right, well, LucasArts, you've got to make game tie-ins. And we didn't quite get there with Episode 2. It was too late. Mm-hmm. So with Episode 3, they were like, you are going to get an Episode 3 video game out the door. And we did, and we worked with this company called The Collective, and a lot of talented people work on games that even aren't that well received, But but anyway, yeah, that was my first celebration, and the first one that I hosted was 2007. So I'm coming up on not too far away from 10 years as a stage host, which is amazing.
So that was Celebration 4 in Los Angeles. I was there for a day.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, I was there. Yeah, I didn't. Celebration 5, Celebration 3 I was there for a day, and Celebration 3 was close to Indianapolis, is only a couple hours from here.
Okay.
So it was an easy drive up. LA, obviously, we had to plan, flying out there and all that. But Celebration 5 was actually, and the thing about it is 3 and 4, we went to kind of promote our fan films. We actually gave our fan films away while we were there and just kind of interacted. We never really did much beyond that because we only had a day. But 5 was my first actual, we were there all weekend. We saw as many things as we could. We got into the Lucas interview. We saw the panels that you introduced or you hosted and stuff, like all the Clone Wars stuff that was going on there. So,
right, season 3.
Yeah, what's that?
Season 3 of the Clone Wars.
Yes, I was. That's right.
Yeah.
So that one was the first time I was just immersed in it, and it was, oh man, Celebration is unbelievable. I love Celebration.
Yeah, yeah. And Anaheim was crazy.
It was.
Yeah. But yeah, hopefully we'll be seeing a lot more of those.
Now, are you heading? Now you've done the Europe one, I think, right?
I did. Yeah, it's funny. I was I was supposed to do the first Celebration Europe in 2007, but my Force Unleashed schedule just didn't allow me to make it over there. So I was really bummed to miss that. Celebration Japan I also missed because they really wanted they wanted all Japanese speaking hosts. So I understood that. Celebration Germany I did. And then Celebration Europe I can't really comment on yet, but stay tuned.
Of course not.
That's all I have. Yeah, I know. Yada yada yada. You know who's really good at this kind of deflection is Dave Filoni. He's like, there's things that he's like, there's things I can't tell you, there's things I can't say, but let's just say this. You know how it's gone in the past. It may or may not go that way in the future, but you don't want to know. It's part of the fun. So I can't really say anyway. So next question. That's what he does.
Really good. That is really good.
He's so good at it, and he's like, I know, just play along. Thank you. And I love that. I love that he's able to just kind of be honest, but also still kind of be responsible with what he has to be responsible with, and all that kind of stuff. So, and it's true, you never really do know until you see official announcements about things. But
absolutely.
But I was going to tell you my George Lucas story.
Yes.
Because I knew he was coming up there, and it was supposed to be super secret, whatever.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's only 2,000 seats in that room.
There was only, yeah.
So
yeah, it was funny. I had a couple, two guys that I was with said, you know what? Nah, I'm going to go on the floor. So they missed it.
Oh, see, yep. That's and I knew that. That's kind of what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be this kind of like impromptu thing, and so he's coming up through the back, and so he actually got there. So there's a couple things. This was one of those panels where Dave shows a bunch of clips and then we talk about them.
Correct.
It was one of those like, okay, here's a bunch of stuff you can expect in season 3. And this was the season with Mother Talzin and the Night Sisters and Darth Maul and all that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know I don't know what's coming up. Normally, when we did Celebration before, the very first time, we saw everything. We talked about it. We were so scripted. By 2010, Dave was like, whatever, you've done this, I've done this. They didn't even show me the clips ahead of time. This is the first time. So this must have been 2012, right? Not 2010. Sorry, 2012. By 2012, he's like, you've done this. You watch the show. This will be fun. I won't even show you the clips. We'll just go. I think we ran out of time. So I'm up there and I'm reacting to and asking questions, like no cue cards. I don't do cue cards with Dave at all. It's just all shooting from the hip. It's just whatever Star Wars question comes to mind, I just ask it. And I like it that way because it keeps it spontaneous. If he says something, I can piggyback off of it. If an audience member asks a question, we can kind of spin that and into a new kind of interesting creative discussion. Like all that kind of stuff, I really love doing those panels with Dave. But George showed up right before the panel started. So the entire time I was doing that panel, I knew he was backstage listening.
Wow.
And he was really involved in this show. And I'm like, George is sitting here listening to me talk for an hour with Dave Filoni, and I've never seen any of the clips. he was really involved making the show. And then, so it was kind of decided, Joel, Aaron, and Dave worked with George every week. I had met George a few times throughout the years, but didn't have a working relationship with him. It was decided, why don't I leave during this clip and those three can have the stage, which was the right move. Was I bummed? Sure. But at the same time, I'm glad I avoided any potential awkwardness there, because George was so relaxed. He put on Dave's hat, and there was this incredible moment of like master and Padawans up on the stage. So removing myself from that was the right move, but like George Lucas is one of my heroes. Back to your hero question. So I remember just sitting in the audience going, "Oh man, that's so cool. He's on my stage. He's sitting in my chair." And afterwards, Dave came up and introduced George to me backstage. And I'd met George before, but you always end up getting reintroduced because he meets so many people. I mean, you just have to understand, like, the guy so he's like, "Hey, this is David Collins," and I didn't bother to go into, "Hey, I worked for you for a decade," and I just said, "Hey, nice to meet you," and he's like,
"You did a good job up there. You did a really good job up there. It sounded rehearsed," and
I was like, "Thank you." And he goes,
"You bet."
And then we all posed for pictures. And I still have a picture of me, Sam, Dave Filoni, Joel Aaron, Megan Finnerty, and George, and Dee Baker. I still have that picture framed here. And actually, Lynn Hale from Lucasfilm sent it to me. And after he walked away to go over to the craft table or whatever, Lynn goes up to me and she goes, "You do realize he doesn't compliment anybody on anything." So that's a big deal.
That is a huge deal. So on the topic of the Clone Wars, actually, I got to know from someone that's kind of on the inside a little bit. I mean, how bummed are you, or how satisfied are you how it did end, and that we did not get, more Clone Wars even after the cell?
Yeah, I mean, I that's a great question. I think, like everybody, I was disappointed to see it end. I think that shows never really have the luxury of knowing when they're going to end in general. I think what happened to the Clone Wars is very common. It happens to a lot of TV shows. A lot of TV shows end before creatives want them to, because creatives, especially when you've got a happy cast and crew and a great show, want it to go on forever and ever, right? We got, what did we get? We got 6 seasons of the Clone Wars.
Yeah, 5.5 basically. Yeah,
5.5. Mm-hmm. A lot of shows, a lot of great shows don't get that far.
Right.
And you can argue that the reason the Clone Wars did get that far was because of George. What the Clone Wars was and what made the Clone Wars so special, I feel like, is the same thing that kept the Clone Wars from continuing, which is that they were mini movies, and they treated them like a little mini movie. And, read between the lines here, I think they budgeted them like little mini movies.
Yeah.
They were incredibly ambitious and expensive and incredible. And George was like, I want to make TV that is special. And that's what he did. It's exactly what he did. I mean, he was giving us caviar,
yes,
where we're used to having like a frozen dinner, that's what we were getting. Now, what's really interesting about Rebels is basically the same crew, right? It's the same crew. And basically the Rebels to me feels like it's turning into the Clone Wars. It's just suddenly kind of jumping in line with everything else that's going on with Star Wars at this time. We were in the prequel era for a long time, right? From really kind of 98 to...
for like 15 years almost.
Yeah, we were really prequel focused. And when we did classic trilogy stuff, or stuff that was around the classic trilogy, it was a little bit more on the side. Like Force Unleashed was really trying to set up between the prequel and the classic trilogy. There were classic trilogy things out, but not like there were with the prequels. That's where the stories seem to really be going. Well, Force Awakens and the movies that are going to follow and the Marvel comics and all this stuff are a tremendous gift. Now, without getting into all the stuff about canon reset and all that kind of stuff, which I think is another kind of, unfortunate disruption or byproduct of of this new era of Star Wars. This new era of Star Wars is giving us new Star Wars films, which we never thought we'd see again. And I think that's incredible. I think that the Clone Wars is rolling with those punches as Rebels. And I think that what's really interesting is when you watch Rebels, I feel like all the lessons that they're learning from Rebels and the Clone Wars are kind of coming back into that show, and it's almost like Rebels is kind of a secret continuation of that show. In my mind. Now, one thing I've learned about Star Wars is that you should never say never. Things can always come back. Things can always come roaring back. The fact that Star Wars is still popular almost 40 years later is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
So you never know what's going to happen. I think that the Clone Wars, as they were made in a very special time. They were George's last big Star Wars productions, and they're special for that reason. And in a way, I'm kind of glad that the Clone Wars ended when George retired in that iteration of it. Rebels is different, but you're really able to see what Dave Filoni is able to do, under this kind of new direction. And I think that we're going to see a lot more incredible stuff. I think the future is really bright. I think it's sad that the Clone Wars are not around, but I think having those stories continue in comic books and novels and kind of the other stuff that's been up on the website, I think is wonderful. Clearly, Lucasfilm loves the Clone Wars. Clearly, the fans love the Clone Wars. I don't think the Clone Wars are done by a long shot. I just think that particular chapter is closed. But the future looks bright, and I'm looking forward to seeing whatever new Star Wars are going to throw our way. Yeah,
I agree. I think that's the only thing I have with the Clone Wars is that even though I'm with you, I like the fact that George, it ended when he kind of ended with Star Wars, but I still think that every show, I just feel like there needs to be some kind of wrap up, some kind of time, some kind of conclusion.
Yep.
Like I always envisioned it lining right up to episode 3. So that's the only thing I wish we would get out of it.
Well, one thing that I do like is that suddenly, we never found out what happened to Ahsoka. She left the Jedi Order. Suddenly she shows up in Rebels.
That's right.
Well, whatever happened to Rex and those guys? Suddenly they're going to show up in Rebels. I think it's tonight. Isn't it tonight?
It was last night.
Oh, it was last night. I got to go download it.
Yes, it's awesome.
I have to download it and watch it. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Oh, my gosh. Well, yeah, so suddenly you've got these characters coming back. So, like, Dave is like, well, I'm going to end up wrapping up that story one way or another. Call it Clone Wars, call it Rebels, whatever.
Yes.
Now they're older, but we're going to continue these character arcs. So that's cool.
It is cool.
They've rolled with the punches, and look, the Disney purchase of Lucasfilm was a big deal, and it meant that there was a lot of stuff that was going to be shaken up. I think that Lucasfilm, I think the shakeup was healthy for Lucasfilm overall, but it doesn't come without its growing pains. And I think that's really kind of the healthiest way to look at Clone Wars. Am I sad that it's gone? Of course. Of course. To say that I'm not sad that it's gone is like saying that it wasn't a great show. I thought Buffy the Vampire Slayer ended early.
Yeah.
I mean, Serenity ended early. Of course, listen to me, all these Joss Whedon shows. Angel ended early. I mean, yeah, you know what I mean? Like TV shows they rarely get to run their course, but I would rather have a TV show leave me begging for more than have it outstay its welcome.
I agree.
And jump the shark.
Totally agree.
So I try and think of these things and put a positive spin on it. In order to, there was someone at Celebration Anaheim that said, it just puts a pall over the entire Disney thing for me that Clone Wars ended. And Dave actually kind of talked her off a ledge and said, you really shouldn't let it do that. We're still here. We're all still employed. We're still going to be telling you great stories. They're going to be different. And you gotta let yourself let in this new stuff that Disney's doing, or else you're going to be missing out on some really incredible moments.
Absolutely.
Simon Kinberg is incredible. Greg Weisman's, his contributions were great. Like, there's just a lot of great stuff happening. And I'd rather embrace that, than let the candle that I keep, that I'm still keeping aflame for the Clone Wars, blind me to everything else.
And I keep encouraging on this show, I'm a huge comic reader, and I'm reading everything that Marvel's putting out now.
I'm behind. I'm so behind.
It's especially the Star Wars line and the Vader line. It is ridiculous how good that stuff is.
I hear the Lando stuff is really good, too.
Lando is... Charles Soule is one of my favorite writers. So, and he's doing an Obi-Wan Anakin storyline starting in January.
Now, let me ask you this controversial question.
Sure.
I haven't read it. I read the clip that they released ahead of time, but I haven't read Aftermath, the Chuck Wendig. Did you read it? And what were your thoughts?
I'm right in the middle of it right now. Yep.
Are you enjoying it?
I am. I'm enjoying it. I hate to do criticism on here, but there is some criticism out there about the style of his writing, which is a little tough. But I'm telling you what, it's refreshing from somebody, and as you mentioned earlier, being from the EU, reading the expanded universe stuff.
Yeah.
This is, it's completely different mindset of what happened after episode 6. And it's refreshing, but it's also it's fantastic reading about what happened with Wedge and what Leia's doing after after the Battle of Endor, and where the New Republic is versus what it was in the expanding universe. It's awesome. I'm enjoying it. I'm trying to get through like a chapter a night, but it's and I know they just announced in New York Comic Con the whole trilogy that's coming for it. So no, I love it. And there's hints in there. Well, the comics especially, like right now, if you want to read something, they're doing a series called Shattered Empire, which is
everyone's raving about it.
Oh my God, it's phenomenal, and it's got ties to Force Awakens, obviously a little bit, ties to Poe Dameron, who his parents are and stuff like that. So,
that's actually probably the biggest deterrent for me. I haven't wanted to see anything Force Awakens.
Yeah,
and I'm not one of those people that means to be militant about spoilers, but I saw Revenge of the Sith in rough edit form 3 or 4 times before I saw the final movie. And I read the script for Attack of the Clones because I was working on Jedi Starfighter and Bounty Hunter before I saw the movie. So this is my first movie since 1999 that I've been able to go into cold.
Wow.
So like I really am trying to preserve that. It's not that I'm trying to be this militant, about spoilers, but I actually just really want that experience because I feel like I didn't have it for the last 2. So I'm in a slightly different position in that regard, but because of that, I haven't really wanted to read all that stuff. I want it to all just kind of hit me, kind of like your thing about toys. Toys are an offshoot of the Star Wars phenomena. Well, I feel like The Force Awakens is the epicenter of this entire reboot, and all the licensing program around it. I want to see that first. And then from there, I'll go back and devour all the other stuff.
But I got to believe, part of me believes that there's no way they would put anything out there that's directly going to reveal anything in episode 7.
You're absolutely right.
So that's the only reason I feel comfortable reading, that kind of stuff. Now, I do shy my eyes away from any spoilers or rumors and whatnot, but anything that's released from Marvel or from Disney, I'm like, I got to get it. I got to read it.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to deter anyone from reading this stuff at all. That's my personal preference, because I think you'll go into The Force Awakens enjoying it on a level that I won't be able to, because you'll have all this backstory. But I guess my thing is I want to see the movie cold just to have that experience in the theater.
That's true.
Then I'll go back and read all that stuff, and then I'll be able to watch it again on a deeper level and as I do my repeat viewing. So
yes,
it's just everyone's different. Everyone has a different way of enjoying Star Wars, and everyone's right,
Yeah.
That's
the thing. Like you said, though, what's crazy about what Disney's doing, I think, is it's even changing how you view the 6-episode movies that are out there right now. For example, I don't want to give it away just in case you do read it, but there's in the Vader book right now, it's revealed to Vader who finds out that Luke Skywalker destroyed the Death Star and tells him. Now, I won't tell you who it is.
Oh, I love that.
But now you know who told him the rebel that destroyed the Death Star in Episode 4. So,
was it Mahdi? It might have been Mahdi or one of those guys.
Was not Mahdi. I'll tell you, it wasn't an Imperial.
Interesting.
So right there, it's like, wow. So when I'm watching Empire Strikes Back, I'm like, he knows who he is. He obviously it says he's searching for Luke Skywalker, so you know how he got that information now, and it's a completely different part of the movie to me, and that's what they're doing. I think reading all these comics and books it's really changing a lot of different storylines, and not storylines necessarily, but you just understand a lot more of the characters, I think, in the episode movies.
Right. Interesting.
Which is really phenomenal. Great. I mean, if you want to. Off tape, I'll tell you who it is if you really want to know. But
no, that's okay. I'll wait. No, I'll read the comic books. I actually have the Marvel app.
Yes.
And I started buying hard copies of it. My problem is that I just can't keep buying Star Wars stuff. I don't have anywhere to put it.
I agree. I get them all digital now too.
Yeah, so I need to go to digital and just read them exclusively that way. But it breaks my heart not to actually have the actual book and the plastic sleeve. Anyway.
Yeah, so before I let you go, I do want to get one more thing out of you is kind of around the movies and stuff like that. I mean, so with, in your opinion, with all that's coming, as of right now, we know there's episode 7. We know that there's episode 8 and 9. We know that Rogue One is getting worked on. We know that there's, possibly a Han Solo movie and maybe a Boba Fett, whatever. I don't know. At what point, and you may know, and again, I apologize if I don't want to make you say anything you can't say, but
Oh, sure.
at what point do you think? At what point do we get away from this time frame and maybe go beyond, this era of Star Wars? Like a lot of people are saying, when are we going to do Old Republic stuff? When are we going to do even beyond that, beyond where we're at now and stuff like that, and getting away from mainly the Skywalker stories?
Boy, that's a great question. Well, I'm happy to tell you that I don't officially know anything, so I'm free to speculate as much as we want. I don't even know if Lucasfilm knows. Mm-hmm. Maybe they do. I'm sure Story Group has outlines, but
right.
I think the really interesting thing about what's happening, I think 7, 8, and 9 are going to be intensely satisfying. Don't get me wrong, but I think that more than anything, and this is just my personal opinion, what's going to drive the future of Star Wars is how these spin-off movies are received. Because if you're telling a story that is a movie that isn't the Skywalker family, that's going to be a first. So if Rogue One comes out and people just eat it up and they love it, then suddenly it gives Story Group and Lucasfilm the ability to basically tell any interesting story that they want.
Right.
And what does that mean to canon? What does that mean, with the Old Republic in particular? I don't know, because I know a lot of that stuff apparently has fallen out of canon, I guess. I'm not really sure. I don't even know if they're sure, because, there's so many books from the Old Republic, and there's the Tales of the Jedi, and there's all kinds of stuff. But what the Clone Wars did, and this is just a quick note about canon in general. I won't get into it because I know it's a really sensitive topic for some fans, and I actually understand why. But canon has been something that has been broken throughout the ages. And it was always something that they tried to avoid doing. I'll give you a great example. George wants to do a planet of witches. And Dave Filoni's backing up, going, can we call them Night Sisters? Sure. And can that planet be called Dathomir? I guess. Why? Well, because there's this book, Courtship of Princess Leia, and, and it would just be nice continuity. He's like, sure. So when it fit, George was like, absolutely, But he wanted to tell his stories, and he wanted the Clone Wars and the movies to be the driving force of the stories. Everything else, kind of back to your toy comment, is kind of in support of that.
Yeah.
So, if you're in the 90s and you're working in Lucas Publishing, or whatever it was called at the time, before there was even Lucas Books, your love for Star Wars is driving you to basically keep a canon, to basically keep these things in continuity with each other, keep continuity. Excuse me. Like I said, just getting over a cold.
Yeah.
You're doing that because you love the brand, because you are, to the best of your knowledge, knowing that these are the only stories that are being told in this era, because that's what you know at the time. That's what we all knew in the 90s. So it wasn't like some big lie that suddenly came out. It was to the best of our knowledge in the 1990s, or this is what happens in Star Wars. But Star Wars is a growing, living, changing thing. And it always has been, even before Disney, when George decided, the Mandalores have a totally different culture. So all that Kathy or Karen Travis stuff is not quite right. I mean, he didn't actually say that about that stuff. That was the end result. If you read Pablo's book about the Essential Reader's Companion, about all the different books in the EU era, which is now Legends, he actually goes into each one and says, well, this fell out of continuity when George decided that the Jedi actually were a monastic order and they couldn't marry. And that didn't happen until it was mentioned in episode 2. But there was a whole episode 1 publishing, effort that happened. And there are storylines in there that fell out of continuity. Like, it happens, and it's not because people want it to happen. It happens because, it's a movie property, and and people are trying to do their best. And I want more movies. I really do. So I think we all want more movies. We all want more Clone Wars. And so we end up rolling with those changes, even when they're painful. Now, this was a huge change that we just had. But, you know, I don't feel like these kind of changes are over. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I feel like, you know, something could happen. A movie could be a huge hit like Rogue One, and suddenly it could inspire them to tell a story that kind of goes back to the idea of Tales of the Jedi or the Old Republic, or goes back to, you know what, let's investigate this Thrawn guy. Well, it's not exactly what happened in Heir to the Empire, but now we at least have a Thrawn story. And you know what? It's a better movie. It's like reading Jurassic Park the book or going to see the movie. You know, if you read the book first, you're going to, you know, I had a friend, I remember walking out of Jurassic Park. Sorry, this is a very long answer, but I walked out of Jurassic Park and I was a teenager. And I had a friend who was there, and I was blown away by Jurassic Park. I couldn't believe the CG that I just saw. I thought the music was great. The story was great. Characters. I turned to my friend. I said, what do you think? And he goes, I don't know. I didn't think it was very good. I don't know why they didn't do this. And he starts rattling off all this stuff that they did in Michael Crichton's book.
You're right.
And I remember thinking, well, okay, but that's a book, and we just saw something incredible, and you weren't able to see it for what it was. You're just seeing it for what you had already imagined it to be because of your love for the book. That's not invalid, but it was a great lesson to me in a difference in mediums, right? Novels are different than games, are different than movies, are different than toys. They're all different, and they're trying to live together in harmony in Star Wars. That's near impossible to pull off cleanly. There's going to be some bumps in the road, and that's what we're experiencing. I'll give you a great example. We went out and told everyone Force Unleashed was canon when it first came out, right?
Oh, right.
This is someone who's a maker of EU that's seen his own stuff that I've actually wrote fall out of canon, right? You know, it was canon. Everyone thought it was really cool. That's how we were allowed to push it as such, to advertise it as such. The game came out, was a huge hit. Started working on a second one. Suddenly, we weren't allowed to call it canon anymore. You know, and I remember at the time being really upset about it until I realized, well, actually, if you have a guy that can pull a Star Destroyer out of the sky, you basically are breaking Star Wars. Like, it's too powerful. And then I started thinking about this conversation about mediums. Having the Force be unleashed makes for a great game, but it doesn't make for maybe a great story. I mean, the Star Killer story would, but you'd have to modify it, because if you pull a Star Destroyer out of the sky, basically Jedi become, you know, Superman or Dr. Manhattan, and that's not what they are. You know, they're fallible. You know, Dave Filoni once said, you know, you put a Jedi up against battle droids, you know, the Jedi will win. You put a Jedi up against a destroyer droid, it's a push, right? Yeah. There's no one that's going to win there unless you're able to do other things like, you know, with grenades like they did on Onderon or whatever. Anyway, my point is that different mediums require different things, and Rogue One, I feel like, is a gateway to who knows what'll happen with Rogue One. Like it's a gateway to all kinds of different stories. And hey, what if we told a story now about whatever? That stuff could come roaring back at any time. I'm not saying it will. I have no idea. But I just think that, you know, this is just yet another chapter in EU and canon being reset. We can see it come roaring back. We can see it change yet again. But just keep in mind, it's a living, breathing thing.
I couldn't have said it better myself, sir. That was awesome.
Well, I hope you agree, and I'm sorry for going on for so long.
No, I do agree. I mean, I'm a fan of the canon. I mean, I just think, you know, like I said, I've always been immersed in Star Wars, you know, books, comics, and all that stuff ever since, you know, I thought the movies were over. But I'm with the canon right now. You know, I like I love the fact that now that when I read a comic, like I said, I know that it kind of adds to the movie experience now. So, you know, do I wish some of that stuff would fall in the canon? I wish it would, especially Heir to the Empire and stuff like that. But doesn't look like it's going to.
Yeah,
doesn't look like it's going to.
Yeah,
I had one of the coolest guys too I met besides yourself. I ran into Leland on the floor at Anaheim, Leland Chi.
Uh-huh.
Man, you know, I could talk to that guy for days.
Yeah.
But we had a good 20-minute conversation there about, he actually asked me what I was reading and stuff, and we kind of bounced off the canon stuff. And but it seems like they got a good grasp on it as far as what they want to put out there.
Yeah, I feel like they've really, you know, they've come a long way in just 2 short years.
You're right.
I mean, it's really incredible what they've done.
It
and
is.
and you can't help but just be rooting for him. You know what? Anything that's good for the brand of Star Wars, I root for.
I agree.
And you have some very passionate people working there.
Well, I've got again with you, like you, Dave. I can sit here and talk to you for days, but if you're willing, I'd love to get you back on, especially after episode 7.
Sure.
To kind of
that would be
your
fun.
review of the movie, because I'd love to hear your take on it.
I better brush up on the comics then before I come back on.
You at least got to find out who told Vader, because we got to talk about that, because it is incredible.
That sounds great. Yeah, I'd love to.
But thank you, David, for taking the time, calling in and being on the show. It's been a real treat talking to you. And again, we'll hopefully whenever I don't know if you're going to Celebration Europe, but I won't be. But as soon as it's back in the States announced, I will be there, and hopefully I'll hook up with you there.
Awesome.
So,
yeah. I'm sure there'll be plenty of coverage coming out of Celebration Europe as well. And we've got an amazing 5 years of incredible Star Wars coming up. So there's going to be no shortage of stuff to talk about. That's for sure.
I know it. And then go watch Rebels, because it was awesome last night.
Oh, I'm going to download it right now.
Yes. Well, Dave, again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, David.
And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right, that was David Collins, Star Wars fanatic and Lucasfilm employee. That was such a great conversation to have with David. Thanks for listening for this special edition episode of Inside the Force. Of course, don't forget, you can go to InsideTheForce.com, listen to all the other podcasts that we have, 21network.com for all the other shows that we have on the network. Follow us at Inside the Force on Facebook and Twitter. And we will be back next week, Casey and I, to talk about any Star Wars news that's out there. Of course, review the next episode of Star Wars Rebels. And, of course, a couple more comics, I think, that are hitting the shelves next week. So, thanks for listening, guys. That was David Collins. I'm David Cottingham, and may the Force be with you.
This has been a production of the 21 Network. For more great podcasts, visit 21network.com. To view additional content, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/21network. Follow us on Twitter at 21network for the latest news and updates. The 21 Network, for the fan and all of us.